So Wordsworth posits in childhood not just a stage of development, but a moral superiority in childhood, which is rooted in the child's connection, emotional connection with nature, which itself suggests a glory which we lose as we get older. And there's something that's accurate about this depiction, but the significance that he derives from it is, I think, totally specious. But let me read. I'm going to read the poem now. I'll reduce it a little bit so I can put more on the screen. But so this is, as I say, this is from Surprised by Joy, not from the poem. Here begins the poem. Now, the first 4 stanzas he writes, and then he comes back to the poem later on. But I'm going to read the whole thing, and it's going to take a minute or two because it's not a short poem. But now remember, it's on recollections of early childhood. So it begins with the early childhood. There was a time when meadow, grove, and stream, the earth, and every common sight to me did seem apparelled in celestial light, the glory and the freshness of a dream. It is not now as it has been of yore. Turn wheresoe'er I may, by night or day, the things which I have seen, I now can see no more. So that's the opening gambit. There was a time, and that's no longer. So there's a time in the past of glory and light. And in films, you often see this portrayed as well. Like the same idea. And now he comes to illustrations. The rainbow comes and goes, and lovely is the rose. Waters on a starry night are beautiful and fair. The sunshine is a glorious birth. But yet I know, where'er I go, that there hath passed away a glory from the earth. Now, while the birds thus sing a joyous song, and while the young lambs bound as to the tabor's sound, to me alone there came a thought of grief. A timely utterance gave that thought relief, and I again am strong. The cataracts blow their trumpets from the steep. No more shall grief of mine the season wrong. I hear the echoes through the mountains throng. The winds come to me from the fields of sleep, and all the earth is gay. Land and sea give themselves up to jollity, and with the heart of May doth every beast keep holiday. Thou little child of joy, shout round me, let me hear thy shouts, thou happy shepherd boy. Ye blessed creatures, I have heard the call ye to each other make. I see the heavens laugh with you in your jubilee. My heart is at your festival. My head hath its coronal. The fullness of your bliss I feel it all. O evil day, if I were sullen while the earth herself is adorning this sweet May morning, and the babe leaps up on his mother's arm, I hear with joy I hear. But there's a tree of many one, a single field which I have looked upon. Both of them speak of something that is gone. The pansy at my feet doth the same tale repeat. Whither is fled the visionary gleam? Where is it now, the glory and the dream? The conclusion of the opening imagery here, which is the first 4 stanzas, concludes with what in the medieval literature is called the ubi sunt. Where is the horse and the rider? In the Two Towers, Lord of the Rings, Theoden will adhere to this. Where is the days when there was glory amongst men? What has happened to this? The world has become dark. Where is the horse and the rider? And the trumpet that was blowing, and the clearingness of the trumpet, and the glories of the days of old, and we live now in this horrid world. What has happened? That sense of lost, that of a past which we no longer live in the present. So that's what Wordsworth evokes here in the first 4 stanzas. You can see it, right? So there's a glorification of childhood innocence. And that's how he begins. So whither has it fled? And now he comes to his explanation. When he comes to his explanation, he admits in a letter that he is drawing upon Platonic ideas of anamnesis, Let me write this word down here for you. Anamnesis. Anamnesis. No, it is correct. Even though I am concussed, I can still spell. Anamnesis. And this is Plato's view of what education is. Education is teaching the child to remember what his life, what being born in flesh leads him to forget. So education is teaching the child to remember what he already knows. Anna means to do it again, and mnesis is to remember again. An Anabaptist is somebody that baptizes repeatedly, more than once. The word Anna is to do it again. And mnesis now is to remember. So to recollect, to remember what we've forgotten. What did we forget? That we are divine beings. That we come from eternity. That there's a goodness that lies within us, which again is the typical view that you will hear in American culture amongst conservatives and liberals, if you want to call them that. I don't like the term, but whatever. Wherever you are on the political spectrum, they will believe in childhood innocence. Again, in terms of Christian theology, this is wholly contradictory to Christian theology. There is no such thing as a human being that's not fallen after Adam and Eve, with the sole exception of Jesus. Every human being is born in sin and is subject to the conditions of the fall and willfully chooses those things as a consequence. Can't escape the grip of sin. We're caught up in it. But the doctrine of anamnesis suggests that we're remembering the goodness within us and then we move away from it. So now he comes to the story, and it is a story of how that happens. And let me read stanzas 5 and onwards then. Our birth is but a sleep and a forgetting. The soul that rises with us, our life's star, hath had elsewhere its setting and cometh from afar, not in entire forgetfulness and not in utter nakedness, but trailing clouds of glory do we come from God, who is our home. Heaven lies about us in our infancy. Shades of the prison house begin to close upon the growing boy. But he beholds the light, and whence it flows, he sees it in his joy. The youth, who daily farther from the east must travel, still is nature's priest, and by the vision splendid is on his way attended. At length, the man perceives it die away and fade into the light of common day. Okay, so we have different stages of life here. We have the beginning of our birth, and then we have the child who he sees, who sees the light still, and then we have the youth, the teenager, if you will, and then finally we have the man. And at each of those stages, he is walking away from the light, willfully. Even though the light is the goodness, he wants to become an adult. The child wants to grow up. The child wants to be like the big people. What child doesn't want to do that? They want to do what their parents do. They want to have all the privileges. They want to do what, if they have an older sibling, they want to be like their older sibling. Why is it that John is allowed to do this and I can't? Well, because John's older. That's not fair, right? So that sense of wanting to be big is what Wordsworth describes here as a self-directed tendency towards fallenness. It doesn't even need to be directed by somebody else. We walk away from it ourselves. So 6th stanza. Behold, the child among his newborn blisses, a 6 years darling of a pygmy size. Think of what a 6-year-old, how big a 6-year-old is. See where mid work of or strife, but it will not be long ere this be thrown aside, and with new part, joy and pride, the little actor cons another part, filling from time to time his humorous stage, with all the persons down to palsy's age that life brings with her in her equipage. as if his whole vocation were endless imitation. I'm going to come back to this in a sec. Thou, whose exterior semblance doth belie thy soul's immensity, thou best philosopher, who yet dost keep thy heritage, thou eye among the blind, that deaf and silent reads the eternal deep, haunted forever by the eternal mind, mighty prophet, seer blessed, on whom those truths do rest which we are toiling all our lives to find. Thou, over whom thy immortality broods like the day, a master or a slave, a presence which is not to be put by. Thou, little child, yet glorious in the might of heaven-born freedom, on thy being's height, why, with such earnest pains, dost thou provoke the years to bring the inevitable yoke of slavery? Thus blindly with thy blessedness at strife, full soon thy soul shall have her earthly freight, and custom lie upon thee with a weight heavy as frost and deep almost as life. So let me comment on this very briefly. Now he's thinking about the 6-year-old, and again he's looking at development and the tendency. And what the child does is imitates, as if his whole vocation were endless imitation. What is imitation? Imitation is trying to do what other people do. Aristotle says that human beings love imitation. It's how they learn. It's called mimesis. It's central to education. You do what you see other people doing. The teacher is a role model. It's not just what he teaches, it's how he acts. Or she acts, right? People do what the people around them do. That's how they fit in, that's how they learn to develop. It's part of, and yet Wordsworth presents, and the whole of the Western tradition is rooted in this educational paradigm of mimesis, of imitating those who are superior to us, not just in years, but in understanding and in character, which is why historically, although it's no longer a part of the university or even the education system, character is essential to a teacher. You have to have good character because you're modeling it. The child is going to be like the teacher. If the teacher is of terrible character, the children are going to pick that up. Bad company corrupts good character. It just does. And if the person that's leading your child is of bad character, then it's going to corrupt your child. There's no getting around it because children are imitating the people in whose presence they spend their time. It's not a problem. It's a reality. And we can even find it in the animal world. The little animals do what the older animals do. But this idea of imitation as something which is problematic, that's Wordsworth's invention. Again, it's a romantic sensibility. As if imitation were our whole vocation. He says this is a real problem. When he says this, he's going strongly against the tradition of mimesis, which has always been a part of education. And is pushing instead the idea of originality, of self-tutoring, of being an orphan that produces his own identity, rather than imitating somebody else's, rather than looking to external things, like I'm a young man, so I look up to other men. No, but their maleness, we're told, is an incidental feature. You can identify your own gender. I don't need to have a father. I don't need to have men to lead me as a young man. I can be whatever gender I want to be. Right? This doesn't come from nowhere, the idea. It's dependent on a sense of human nature which is not externally observable. And Wordsworth thinks that the exterior semblance belies his soul's immensity. And he sees the child as the best philosopher. Now, is this Christian emphasis? Remember, Jesus brings up a little child and says, unless you become like one of these, you will not enter the kingdom of God. Is Jesus and Wordsworth saying the same thing here? Is Jesus commending the child as the prophet, as the leader of our church? Does anyone put a child in in the place of running your church or running your life or in your family? Has anyone decided that the child is going to decide what the family does? No. And Wordsworth doesn't really mean it either. He's not that stupid. Right? Nobody's that stupid to let the little child lead them literally. Okay, well, what does the child say? Let's and we'll go from that. Nobody ever is going to do that. What he means by this, however, is that the innocence within the child, which he's closer to because he has less experience, is the thing that ought to guide us. So the goodness of childhood innocence, which we lose, he thinks, by experience and by imitation, is something we need to get back to. So he means it in a metaphorical sense. He doesn't literally mean that the child is the best philosopher, and yet he says that. And the emphasis in our culture becomes on very much on this idealized, innocent child. And so we have, and I really find this objectionable, childhood actors and childhood beauty pageants and so forth, where the child looks like this little, like an adult in miniature, and are supposed to speak as if, butter wouldn't melt in their mouths. And they're sweet, and again, this Disneyfication of culture, where everything that is related to childhood is good, and everything related to adulthood is bad. Oh, by the way, Disney's also rooted in orphans. From Bambi onwards, they're orphans over and over and over. Same thing, right? So it's that paradigm shift, and it goes from imitation to imitation, but the imitation now is the imitation of a romantic sensibility, which we are given to us at all times. So when you're an old man like me, all I can do is look backward on the time when I was closer to a child, and it's further and further away from me, and I wish I were younger again. I've never thought that. I never wanted to be young. I always wanted to be old and wise. I don't know if I've become wise, but I have become old. The one I'm going to get for sure. But culturally speaking, what you want is to cultivate wisdom in children, because then they will get there eventually. But you have to promote it. So you have to revere education and culture and experience. You have to say, we're going to look to the senators, the wise old people, and they're going to lead, as opposed to we're going to let the children and the natural sensibilities lead us. Comment, question, or wisdom is corrupt?
No, wisdom, the seek of wisdom or gaining wisdom corrupts the innocence of the child.
That's what Wordsworth suggests, even though in Psalm 1, which is a wisdom song and opens the whole Psalter, it talks about being planted by streams of living water and learning from your elders. And remember, elders lead your church. Parents lead their families. But in the Wordsworthian paradigm, there's something deeply problematic about experience and about wisdom, about worldly wisdom. And he doesn't mean this in a Christian sense, that all worldly wisdom, Jesus will also condemn the wisdom of the world, because Christ's humility is foolishness to the Greeks, because it doesn't recognize the significance and necessity of the cross. Right? They try to save themselves by their own virtues and efforts. So the idea that humility is the path that pleases God, that Jesus evidences, this is foolishness to the world. Of course, the world's wisdom doesn't understand that. But when we read that in Paul, he's not condemning the wisdom of the world entirely, but just in relation to salvation. And also everything that comes with it then, because the Christian world will reconstitute all that. But so he presents the child as 1, the best philosopher, 2, the mighty prophet, or seer blessed, and 3, someone who possesses immortality like a master over a slave. A little child, yet glorious in the might of heaven-born freedom, on thy being's height. And yet, in spite of that, the child perversely wants to be older and like the adults. And so he asks, why? Why, with such earnest pains, dost thou provoke the years to bring the inevitable yoke? So the child is born what? Free. Where is it? You're glorious in the might of heaven-born freedom. This is how you were when you were a child. And yet you do what? You bring the inevitable yoke. It's prophetic in the sense that these are biblical themes. You know, why are the people of Israel inclined towards slavery? Why do they go to Egypt? Why did they end up in Egypt? Why do they want to be in the land of Egypt? Do they not want to be redeemed? Do they not want to be free? And yet they incline towards sin and slavery. Wordsworth's playing on the same notes, but he's reconstituting them not towards God, but rather towards the goodness within ourselves. It resonates with us because we, in Western culture, have a Christianized worldview. And so it slots in there quite neatly. By the way, to this very day, this area, this Lake District, has, I think, 500,000 Japanese tourists that come every year to the Lake District. Likewise to Prince Edward Island. Huge numbers of Japanese tourists. The PEI is a little different because Anne of Green Gables was used as a way of teaching English in Japanese schools. But still, the idealized natural landscape that is depicted in Anne of Green Gables, which PEI is, PEI looks a lot like this, by the way. Looks like the Lake District, except it's on an island. It fits very much with a Japanese idea of the presence of goodness in nature. They don't have a sense of God in Japanese culture. But they do have a sense of harmony and joy in nature. And Wordsworth talks about that. So Japanese tourists appear in huge numbers to go to the Lake District because they resonate with what Wordsworth is promoting. And what he's promoting, and let me put a word on this, is panentheism. Which is theism in all. God in all things, including nature, which he's posited to be good. So rather than Christian theism, we get panentheism. And this still is the dominant emphasis in our culture, I would say. We've moved from Christian theism, the personhood of humanity reflecting the personhood of God, towards a spirituality that sees spirit in all things and identifies the feature of human goodness in our spirit, but not in our bodies, and not in the order of things, and not in the family, but simply on an individual basis. So he concludes that, then he moves on. Oh, joy! Nonetheless, despite the walking away from innocence, oh, joy that in our embers, now the embers are after a fire burns down, all you have left is a few coals that are burning, and they're now covered with gray. There's just a little bit of, in the midst of all that great flame, there's embers left over. Oh, joy that in our embers is something that doth live, that nature yet remembers what was so fugitive. The thought of our past years in me doth breed perpetual benedictions. Not indeed for that which is most worthy to be blessed, delight and liberty, the simple creed of childhood, whether busy or at rest, with new-fledged hope still fluttering in his breast. Not for these I raise the song of thanks and praise, echoing the Book of Common Prayer, but for those obstinate questionings of sense and outward things, fallings from us, vanishings, blank misgivings of a creature moving about in worlds not realized, high instincts before which our mortal nature did tremble like a guilty thing surprised. But for those first affections, those shadowy recollections, which, be they what they may, are yet the fountain light of all our day, are yet a master light of all our seeing. Uphold us, cherish, and have power to make our noisy years seem moments in the being of the eternal silence. Truths that wake, hence, in a season of calm weather, though that is cut. I should get a different version of this because they're massacring it. I don't know who wrote this, but they can't even copy properly. It should be truths that wake to extinguish never. So there's a line missing here. Anyway. Hence in a season of calm weather, though inland far we be, our souls have sight of that immortal sea which brought us hither, can in a moment travel thither, and see the children sport upon the shore, and hear the mighty waters rolling evermore. Then sing, ye birds. Sing, sing a joyous song, and let the young lambs bound as to the tabor's sound. We in thought will join your throng, ye that pipe and ye that play, ye that through your hearts today feel the gladness of the May. What though the radiance which was once so bright be now forever taken from my sight, though nothing can bring back the hour of splendor in the grass, of glory in the flower, I will grieve not, rather find strength in what remains behind, in the primal sympathy which having been must ever be, in the soothing thoughts that spring out of human suffering, in the faith that looks through death, in years that bring the philosophic mind. And O ye fountains, meadows, hills, and groves, think not of any severing of our loves, yet in my heart of hearts I feel your might. I only have relinquished one delight, to live beneath your more habitual sway. I love the brooks which down their channels fret, even more than when I tripped lightly as they. The innocent brightness of a newborn day, 'tis lovely yet. The clouds that gather around the setting sun hath kept watch o'er man's mortality. Thanks to its tenderness, its joys and fears, to me, the meanest flower that blows can give thoughts that do often lie too deep for tears. Gosh, it's terrible. I wonder what it says it's lie. Anyway, good thing I know the poem better than what's written on the page. So what he is describing here is a return to innocence. And this is what Wordsworth will describe as something akin to a new birth. So the loss of immortality, or the sense of immortality, which comes from the recollections of early childhood, can be regained through imagination. So the Romantics are going to emphasize this over and over, and you will find that in our culture, the same emphasis on the imagination will be placed, especially in education circles. They think that what we are to do is to cultivate the imagination in children as a way of recovering the innocence which resides within them. So the imagination becomes the primary faculty of recovering what was lost, and imagining and connecting with that sense of goodness as a way of influencing the presence, and through imaginative empathy, understanding with others. So you first love your own mind, and then you love your neighbor as yourself. So it's an inversion of what in Christian theology, Jesus asked what the greatest commandment is. He says to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, echoing the Shema, Deuteronomy 6, verse 6. And then when the second is like it, to love your neighbor as yourself. Wordsworth will say that the greatest love is to love yourself. And the second is like it, and you love your neighbor as yourself. Right? But you first love yourself. It's the primary directive of psychology, teaching people to forgive themselves, love themselves, whatever. In the methodology of Alcoholics Anonymous, they will have to give themselves over to a higher power. They don't, even though it was invented by Christians, they don't say God, a higher power. And the higher power can be whatever you want it to be, and it can be you. If you do give your life to Christ and understand that he is the higher power, then the method will work for you, by the way, because you're not relying on yourself, and yourself is the problem in an addiction. But what if you have no notion of a higher power? What if that is a meaningless phrase for you? Do you know that Alcoholics Anonymous doesn't work in Japan? Because they have no sense of what a higher power is. It's a meaningless concept. There's no higher power. Like the idea of God, unifying, even in Greek and Rome, Western paganism, there's a sense of a higher power. Aristotle has it, an unmoved mover. It's not there in Eastern thought. It's not there in Japanese thought. So the methodology of Alcoholics Anonymous to stop being your own God and rely on a higher power doesn't mean anything conceptually. You only realize these things when you engage with people from different cultures and see how different. People are not the same. Their background and education is different. The way they look at the world comes from their upbringing. Are some cultures closer to the truth than others? I think they are. Are they all in need of redemption? Yes. Are they all fallen? Yes. Are they all in need of redemption in such a way that without redemption they would be corrupt and destructive beyond all repair? Yes, they are. There's no culture that does not need to be utterly redeemed. But some are closer than others. How far away? Too far away, but still closer. And the Greco-Roman world is closer, which is why Western culture, well, let's put it this way. God sends his son in the midst of the height of the Roman Empire when Caesar Augustus claims himself King of Kings and Lord of Lords. His description, right then, and the whole known world is Roman at that period. And Christians say, no, Caesar is Lord. He's the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Who do you think they're echoing? Is it in a note of rebellion? It sure is, because there's only one, right? But the Romans have a sense of the idea of a King of Kings and a Lord of Lords. It's there within their culture. So Roman culture, as pagan as it is nonetheless closer than in Japanese culture, which has no notion of that, although they have an emperor that holds their whole structure together, right? Anyway, not to pile on the Japanese. That's not my intention in any way. But I wanted to show in this poem a monumental worldview shift in Western thought, which is, I'm in Canada, whether we're from Canada and Indigenous, as I am in both cases, or whether we're from other countries, we've moved here, English is a second language, the cultural ethos comes Western and also romantic. And the romantic is in some ways the decisive modern shift. And it's anti-Christian to the core. It moves away from Christian theology. And insofar as it does so, it becomes self-destructive and irrational. It promotes feelings over thoughts. It promotes the self over the past. It promotes children over adults. It promotes folly over wisdom and calls it wisdom. Right? All of these shifts happen in this period. You want to comment or? Seppuku, yeah. You have to create order somehow. So this is the thing. If you don't think that there's a God, then order needs to be asserted, and you idealize order. Like, because God is, even if you're just an 18th century deist, as in the Western tradition there, so the idea of a God is a placeholder. He's the God of nature. And he's an unseen, the unmoved mover of Aristotle, but he's like the blind watchmaker. Like, sets the world in motion. He's no longer needed. It's already running on its own. At least you have a concept there of order. God is the order. You don't need him anymore because the order is there. You can see him in natural laws. But still there's a sense of order. Human beings require order in order to govern themselves. So in Japan, where they don't have an idea of God, order will be that much more important. You will not go against the norms. It's more rigorously enforced. They are almost divine. And cultures that are without God at the center in terms of their cultural assessment, I think will have a stronger sense of order in place. We would have once had that in the Western world. Now we have the what is our God is our feelings, and everyone's feelings, everyone's individual feelings, which we think that the state is there to authorize and enforce. So you can't offend somebody, you can't say something that will hurt somebody's feelings, or we're going to punish you for doing that. We're going to send you to counseling for rehabilitation, for re-education, because you've offended the divinity that's in all of us. Right? Anyway, I'll stop for now, and we'll see you next time.